Taheebo is spelled T like Tom, A-H-E-E, B like boy, O, then continue with the word T, and then the word club. The complete website is TaheeboTClub.com. Or call us at 818-610-8088, Monday through Saturday, 9 to 5, California time. That's 818-610-8088.
Brothers, sisters, working class heroes, this is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about as we come to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and wrapping up our coverage of the Netroots Nation Conference. One of the big events of the weekend, and I got to tell you, I've had a great time here in Pittsburgh talking about how we change the world one issue at a time. All the labor organizing, all of the labor voices, all of the people who are saying what I've been saying for years. If we're going to change the country, if we're going to change this country for the better, it's going to start in the workplace. It's going to be about organizing workers to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, voice on the job. If you want to change things, you change the economics, you change the workplace, and start moving away from where we're going. And we're going in a really ugly kind of place in this world of gig work, and you're your own risk factory, really. Now, I got a lot of responses from people in some of the conversations that we've had. Some pushback on the charter school stuff. And I'll be honest, the fact that the charter school folks are paying attention and not attacking me on the lines of, no, you're wrong, charter schools are so much better. No, you're wrong, here's the proof of how well students do in the charter environment. That's not the argument, because it's not true. The argument is choice. It's choice. And it's other stuff. And that's the interesting part, especially here in Pittsburgh, where I look around and there are a lot of these charter schools that have sprung up. And in talking with some of the folks that work here in the facility, it is a big thing here that's really hurting the public schools. This is one of those things that when you talk to teachers, they're concerned about, because every one of them has a story, especially in my state of Pennsylvania, where you have kids who go to these cyber charters and then end up skipping an entire year because, oops, we didn't learn anything. Now you've got to remediate, and you've got to spend all this extra time. Slows everything. What we're doing, especially to poor kids, is criminal. And until we can have a real conversation about how we move in a direction that educates everyone, I've been advocating for one system that everyone is in, that everyone benefits from, and as I've said before, having the elites and the wealthy in the same district as the poor and downtrodden is only going to raise the bar. Rich community is going to say, hey, we want education that has music and art and gym, and we want librarians, and we want guidance counselors, and we want nurses, and we want things that, well, seem to the average person to be what is common in a school. Sadly, when you're talking about high poverty areas, because of the way we draw the lines, not so much common. So they get silver bullet quick fixes where privatization and profitization seem to trump all. And so that's my little pushback to the attacks. Again, nobody brought up that the education is superior. Now, I remember when I went to Catholic school as a kid, the argument back then was, Catholic school was so much more superior than public school. And the argument was that, they were much more strict and parents were much more involved. And you could make that argument. The charter people aren't making that argument and haven't made that argument. They've made the choice argument. The divisive arguments of, well, like-minded people like us. And I don't think that's what we need in this moment, because look what it's gotten us. So there is that. But today on the program, I'm going to have some labor voices on the program. Again, for me, the big part of all of this conference is that underthread, that undercurrent of labor and talk of organizing and moving forward. So we got a lot to get to. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, AFT President Randy Weingarten going to be here to share some thoughts. Back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day that Joyce Miller became the first woman ever elected to the executive board of the AFL-CIO. In her 2012 obituary, the New York Times described Joyce's commitment to women's rights in the labor movement, writing, "Miss Miller saw union membership, collective bargaining, and labor contracts as the road to equality for working women, and she believed that women should be a part of union management to make sure that attention was paid to issues like equal opportunity, equal pay, parental leave, child care, health insurance, and discrimination in the workplace." Joyce grew up in Chicago, where she earned her master's degree in education from the University of Chicago. She first entered the labor movement as a worker at a gumball factory while attending college. After graduation, she became the education director for the Amalgamated Clothing Workers Union in Pittsburgh. She remained dedicated to union education for rank and file members. Joyce was a founding member of the Coalition of Labor Union Women, or CLU. She served as CLU's East Coast vice president, eventually being elected CLU's president in 1977, a position she would hold for 15 years. Under her leadership, CLU worked as a powerful voice for women's reproductive rights, improving child care, and increasing the number of women in union leadership positions. In 1993, President Bill Clinton named Joyce Miller the executive director of the Glass Ceiling Commission. The purpose of the commission was to gather testimony about women's experience in the workplace and to draft a report of their findings. Of her career, Joyce said, "I came to the labor movement with stars in my eyes. I saw it as a vehicle for social change, and I never changed my mind." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as we wrap up our coverage here at Netroots Nation, netrootsnation.org, the website, thrilled to see our good friend Randy Weingarten here on the final day. Randy is the president of the American Federation of Teachers, AFT. Randy, thanks for sitting down with us.
Of course.
So what brings you to Netroots Nation?
You know, it's the incredible activists. I was honored to, be asked to be part of it, and we need to also make sure that we can fund and this incredible group of progressive activists continue to get funded and continue to do the work that they do. And I'm glad to see Netroots Nation back in person in Pittsburgh, so I wanted to be here.
Yeah, no, there's been a lot of great conferences. In fact, we were at your convention in Boston not too long ago.
Yep.
And this bringing people back together and the networking and the opportunities that come out of that are so important in this moment.
And let me dwell on that for a second, because I think that that's really important in so many ways. It's complete bullshit when people say that, the unions didn't want people to be together, that the unions wanted people to be at home. We know the power of relationships and of community building and being together in person. And that's what creates trust, and that's what creates energy. So, the real key has been, how do you do this over the course of the pandemic? How do you make sure that you can be in person, in community with each other, and be safe?
Right.
That has always been the challenge. And what is remarkable about this summer, even as the variant, the Omicron variant has been, all over America, we have the treatment and the vaccine options now to keep people safe. So, whereas there may not be mandates right now, What we know is that there are tools right now to keep people safe. Masks, if you need it, vaccines, treatment options, and all of that is because of Joe Biden's administration making sure that they could get it out to people. And I think that's why you see a huge difference this summer in all these in-person events of people coming back together.
No, it is important. I'm waiting for somebody to come out with the sticker. Joe Biden did that. Because we saw it, the gas pumps all over the place.
Right.
Now that it's coming down, you don't see them slapping that stupid sticker all over the place.
under $4 I saw today.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, teachers, you in particular, attacked for wanting to keep people safe. It's almost like the kid who failed biology is and science is the one leading the messaging on the right, because if I remember right, it was about keeping kids and teachers safe, not about destroying education and indoctrinating children and all the other craziness we hear on the right.
Well, I think what has happened in terms of the right wing is that they understand, because they live in the world of anger and fear and hate, they have a sixth sense for what will exacerbate anger and agita and fear and divide. That's the world they live in. I live in the world of how you create hope and aspiration and a future forward. So what they saw, I think, and we saw it, there was a political article and a NBC article, I think back in February 2021, that said they were going to use this period of time to try to attack public schools as a means of dividing voters. So they, what the Rachel Maddow used to say this, like, believe them when they say it.
Yep.
They're arrogant enough to tell you what they're going to do. So they, they've always wanted to undermine public education and replace it with a privatized situation. Betsy DeVos has never been unclear about that. They now have taken this to the next step, which is divide, 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 make things worse, 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 create and keep people in their tribes, create and keep people in terms of grievance. So instead of being the party of hope and the party of problem solving, they are the party of division and hate and smear and fear. And that's what they did around COVID. So, you saw it in terms of last school year. All of a sudden you had this Delta virus emerge. And so the physicians, pediatricians said, oh my God, to keep everybody safe, we're going to wear masks. We're not the scientists. They are.
Right.
Okay, so we want to be in schools. They say you got to keep people wearing masks. So we're listening to the peds. They're telling us this. And then you see what the right wing did. Dividing parents, the mask police. The worst is, though, this whole push at chilling teachers from actually answering the questions of kids, from actually being kids' helpers. We're in Pittsburgh, Mr. Roger. We have to be kids' helpers. And so this attempt to ban books and censor curriculum, as opposed to, if there are conflicts or issues or tough topics, where is it better to talk about them than in class, under the tutelage of a good teacher? So they're getting so bad, Rick, they're getting so extreme that now they're banning The Diary of Anne Frank and The Story of Ruby Bridges.
Yeah, but Mein Kampf is still in some of the schools.
So, but think about, why would they ban The Diary of Anne Frank and The Story of Ruby Bridges? I mean, why? These are age-appropriate books for elementary school kids. Why would they ban them? Because they don't want kids to have empathy for other kids who faced oppression. A black kid who faced oppression, a Jewish kid who faced oppression. This is all about trying to destroy trust, trying to create distrust, trying to create fear and division. And what public schools are about is we're about trying to help people build relationships, build resilience, create trust, have a joy about going to schools. So we're trying to actually say, let's recover and thrive and bring everybody back in and create safe and welcoming environments where kids really have joy and where we go back to the basics. This is our campaign right now, what kids and communities need. The right wing is fight, 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 divide, 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 create fear. And if you can't do it based upon facts on the ground, then make things up. Like what DeSantis just did this week. One of the most horrific things, he gets on to one of his press conferences, looks right at the camera, and says, pathological liar, excuse me, says, well, teachers, they're trying to change children's sexes. It is a pathological lie. It is defamatory. How dare you do that? And then he says, that's what happens in other states. That's why we had to do what we did. How dare you do that? And, parents know better, like just in Ohio. Ohio, nonetheless, 91% of parents said their kids' teachers are a positive role model for their kids.
Right. But isn't this one of those moments where you go, my kid's wonderful, but yes, all of those other teachers are doing what he says, and we have to destroy public education? Because we got a guy running for governor in this state who not only wants to cut education funding in half, but also wants to do what the right wing's been dreaming about and give money to parents to homeschool.
Yeah, I mean, this is they have since Milton Friedman, since the Brown versus Board of Education decision, the right wing, the extremist elements of the right wing, because a whole bunch of Republicans that love their public schools, the extremist elements of the right wing have been trying to undermine education, take money out for private schools, take money out for for-profit, and just basically undermine it. I don't know whether they're afraid of it or whether they just want, the market to prevail or privatization. But the bottom line is, what has been layered on that now is this level of fear and smear. And it does create fear. It's nonsense. It's defamatory. But they can't win the old-fashioned way. They can't win on ideas because they have none. So what they're doing is just creating fear and exacerbating grievance and tribalism.
Yeah, and destroying.
Yeah, it's the way in which you and I have talked about this before, and I remember the last time we talked about it, they smeared me about talking about it. But this is what DeSantis is doing, is the autocratic playbook.
Absolutely. And he's a smart, look, he a lot of people think of him in the same vein as Trump, not very bright. This guy has, Ivy League credentials. This is no dummy.
Yeah,
he knows exactly what he's doing.
He's an elitist. He's from the Ivy League, and but he's deflecting in that kind of way because his wish for power overrides anything else.
And if it means tearing us apart and destroying public education, so much better for them, because that's the goal anyway, isn't it?
So, but I think it's deeper than that. I think it's what you have here in terms of this extremist group or of MAGA folks is that they're taking, like him or not, Trump. He created a cult following.
Yep.
All these new wannabes are trying to take that cult following away from Trump and make it their own. But what is at stake in their fight for power, their political fight for power, what's at stake is all of our freedoms, is our democracy, is the economic safety net we have right now, and children's futures in our schools. Because it's only through public schooling that any child really has a shot, where the government has to be accountable for making sure that that child at least gets reading, writing, arithmetic, and science and social studies. You don't get that. There's no accountability for that in homeschooling. There's no accountability for that in vouchers. And so what we in America believe as public school people is that we have an obligation to all kids, and that it takes resources, and that at this moment in time, after 2 years of disruption, we got to really focus on a couple of things. Help kids recover and thrive. Go back to the basics. Joy, emotional and social supports, but reading, science, pathways to their future. That's what we believe in.
Absolutely. Now, one of the other things I got to ask you, Randy, in looking at where we are, there's a lot of reports of teacher shortages, a lot of teachers leaving the profession because all of these arrows, all of these attacks, all of this heated rhetoric. How are we going to get to that place that you're talking about if the good people are leaving?
Well, part of the problem this year, and I'm glad it's been reported on, is that we've had a teacher shortage for a long time because people are not paid what they ought to be paid. There's what the Economic Policy Institute calls a teacher tax, that teachers are basically paid about 20 to 25% less than they can get for the same skills and knowledge in this hot market in non-teaching jobs. So, between long-term subpar compensation and long-term erosion of working conditions, which are students' learning conditions, and then on top of that, all of the effects of COVID, yet nothing was taken off their plate for the last school year. And then on top of that, all the blaming and shaming and fear-mongering, of course, it's a perfect storm. Of course there's a teacher shortage. But what we're seeing is this. Parents actually care about this. This is one of the major things parents care about. That's part of the reason why DeSantis had to actually say something about the teacher shortage. So what the AFD is doing is we're trying to problem solve it. And there are governors who have really helped us, like Governor Lujan Grisham. She came up with a really good plan this spring to help and raise teacher salaries, made it easier for people who retired to come back to substitute, did the Grow Your Own programs, which we need, which will help diversify the profession. Those, vets, that's part of the Grow Your Own program. That's part of the Troops to Teachers program that we've had for years that Donald Trump killed and then Joe Biden brought back. And so, we're trying to problem solve all of this stuff right now with districts and with states. But the best way to do it, and costs not a dime, RESPECT. Create a climate of respect, because teachers want to make a difference in the lives of kids. What other profession takes money out of their pocket routinely when they don't get paid enough to make sure their classrooms are okay?
I love my kids' teachers, every one of them. I respect them, and look, I know I couldn't do what they do, and I'm grateful for the work that they do, and I'm grateful for the work that you do. And it's always great that you take some time and sit down and talk with us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for everything you do.
As always, great stuff. Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers. Quick break back here in Pittsburgh for the Netroots Nation Conference. Right back.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day striking Teamsters in Minneapolis defied martial law. They stopped scab trucks, forcing the release of their strike leaders. Armed with bayonets and machine guns, the National Guard had patrolled the streets for nearly a week. They seized scores of strikers and union leaders and threw them into military stockades. Drivers were outraged. They defied Governor Olson and Major General Walsh, who, on behalf of the Citizens Alliance and trucking bosses, were determined to break the strike. Soon after strikers were imprisoned, drivers began chasing scab trucks across the city. Multiple reports poured in of picketers forcing trucks to stop. Some unloaded their cargo onto bridges. Others chased, captured, and damaged the scab trucks. Strikers ripped ignition wires out, forced scabs from the wheel, and then disappeared before police and the National Guard could arrive to retaliate. In just 3 hours, strikers had overturned nearly 70 trucks. Unable to stop the superior force of striking drivers, Bill Brown, Vincent, and Miles Dunn were ordered unconditionally released from the military stockades. Now, employers, the governor, and other strike-breaking agencies were eager to propose peace to federal mediators. But they proposed to scrap the terms of their earlier May agreement. In response, the leaders of Local 574 issued a general strike call. In it, they asked, quote, "Is there one man so blind as not to see that if 574 is allowed to go down to defeat under the brutal hammering of military despotism, the whole labor movement of the city will have been dealt a mortal blow? Union men, brothers, sisters, fellow workers, what are you going to do about it? We appeal to you for solidarity." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
The Old Home Place is a classic theme of Americana, expressed in everything from Norman Rockwell paintings to Woody Guthrie's powerful folk lament, "Ain't Got No Home in This World Anymore." But for a heart-rending modern-day version of the emotional pull of home, you can't beat the poignant wail of a new song entitled "The Low-Down Down Home Atherton Rich Man Blues." Warning, you might need a box of tissues to get through this sad saga. Atherton, California, is a small town of some 7,500 souls who face a dreadful housing crisis. Unlike most situations, though, they are alarmed by a looming threat of too much housing. It seems that a recent California law requires cities to provide some affordable multifamily housing to help cope with a growing statewide shortage of homes, meaning Atherton needs to put in about 350 townhouse units as its share. Townhouses shriek the locals. This can't be. Unrich people live in townhouses. You see, Atherton is a precious enclave in the heart of the Silicon Valley, where only tech billionaires are allowed. The price of their mansions averages $8 million, with each one secluded on at least an acre of land. So, townhouse people? No way! As one affordable housing advocate put it, Atherton talks about multifamily housing as if it were a Martian invasion. In a letter to the city council, the multi-billionaire Andreessen family wailed that allowing more than one residence per acre, quote, "will massively decrease our home values and quality of life." I'm sure you weep for them, so grab a tissue. Yet some Athertonians are at least trying to find solutions. One suggests that all of the residents' swimming pool cabanas should count toward the town's affordable housing requirements. This is Jim Hightower saying, if that won't make you cry, nothing will.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to Netroots Nation here in Pittsburgh. It's amazing who you run into in the hallways, and one of our favorite guests, Sarah Nelson, dropped by our booth here on Radio Row. Sarah is the president of the American Flight Attendants Union.
The Association of Flight
Attendants. I always screw that up, and I don't know why.
Well,
it's AFA. I get that.
A lot of people do it. We're living in America.
But it's so great to see you.
It's so great to see you too. Yeah,
and
always.
What brings you here?
I didn't think I was coming to Netroots this year, and then got a call from Abigail Disney. She is screening her new film, The American Dream and Other Fairy Tales. So she asked me to come speak on a panel, and I somehow made it work, fit in between other conventions.
You're all the place. You're going to be in Philly later today, Boston tomorrow. You're just racking up the miles. It's almost like you fly for a living.
That's kind of what I do. Yeah. It's good. Because while I'm traveling between conventions and rallies, I get to organize my people.
And you've got a campaign going on right now with Delta, right?
We do. We do. It's the last major airline without a union for flight attendants, and they're incredibly anti-union, steeped in anti-union efforts for a very long time. The campaign has been on fits and starts for the last 25 years. 9/11, the crisis of COVID, and all the economic downturn around 2008. Those were not great times for organizing, but otherwise, Delta flight attendants have consistently been trying to get a union for 25 years. The last time they had an election was in 2010. That was the first election that we had where only the votes that were cast actually count. The rule under the Railway Labor Act was for over 70 years that if you didn't vote, it counted as a no vote. And we got President Obama to change that, but it was very shortly afterwards that Delta actually organized to increase the threshold to get to an election. So the law was changed. The oldest labor law in the country was changed in 2012 to change from 35% of workers showing interest in an election to 50%. And they have to be physically assigned cards. They're not electronic cards. So when we're talking about a workforce of between 23 and 24,000 workers, we're talking about over 12,000 signed cards that are only good for a year. And we are working on turning those out right now.
Yeah, no, I know you're doing a great job, but I look at this and I remember the anti-union Delta campaign where, instead of paying dues, you could have a video game and you could go to a baseball game, and
You know what's so interesting about that? That became, a huge hot topic and really made the rounds everywhere when that was discovered. That poster had been sitting in the workplace for 18 months. So here you had Delta workers who were so steeped in just having the anti-union rhetoric around them all the time that people were walking by this, having this in the workplace every single day, and not even realizing that it was something so incredibly offensive. And it wasn't until that actually saw the light of day within the general public that the workers were like, oh my God, my company has such disrespect for me that they would talk with me in this way and disrespect my own choices in such a way and think that they can buy me off like this. That actually that made the rounds among the Delta workers, and they understood what kind of union busting nonsense that was.
Now we're in an important moment. I mean, we had Chris Malls on the program yesterday. There's this renewed interest in organizing because I think things like that people are finally tired of. Are we excited about the moment that we're in?
I mean, people are tired of the union busting. I would say that for 40 years we have been talking about inoculating people against the company anti-union campaign because the union busting was so prevalent everywhere, starting with Ronald Reagan firing the air traffic controllers and, making it a dirty word to strike, making it a dirty word to show any kind of worker power, and to unionize. And then they used bankruptcies and merger consolidation and all kinds of tools and, terrible lopsided trade deals to destroy unions and destroy good union jobs and make people so desperate that they'd be willing to accept anything. And that has driven us to a place where workers across this country are feeling the same thing. Two-tiered systems, the inability to access or be able to afford health care, the inability to retire, the inability to even spend time with your families because you're working 2 and 3 jobs just to get by. And the pandemic did a couple things. It shined a light on how workers in every single workplace are treated the same way, treated as disposable, even when they're called essential. And also that people are working themselves to death. And as Jennifer Bates said in front of Congress when she testified and as an Amazon warehouse worker, she said, we're the billionaires. We just don't spend it. In other words, we make all the wealth in this country. We're the ones with all the power. And she also said, we don't work. We don't live to work. We work to live. And that is something I think that people are feeling all over this country, that these corporations have been trying to make us feel lucky to have a job and it's about time that we get together and make them feel lucky to have our work.
Yep, that's the message. I hope coming out of this and the message going forward. I know you got a lot to do, a busy schedule, lots of people pulling in every direction. I appreciate you sitting down with us for a couple minutes.
Absolutely, Rick. And I just want to note that our great organizer-in-chief, Bernie Sanders, is pulling together these rallies. I'm headed there today in Philly, tomorrow in Boston, as you mentioned. And these are working-class rallies. So this is taking one other tool that the corporate elite has been trying to use to divide us, which is to divide us along political ideologies, and get down to the fact that we're the working class. It's not about politics. It's about people. And our democracy is not a democracy that just sort of exists on its own. It exists with the backdrop of an economy based on capitalism. And capitalism doesn't give a shit about people. It only cares about profits and getting more and more from people. And as Heather McGhee said in Abigail Disney's movie, which people will get to see today for the first time, she said, they'll just keep pushing. Capitalism will just keep pushing until we go back to a plantation economy.
Yep.
That's where we're headed if we don't understand what this moment is, and that we have to push back and band together. And I want to really thank Bernie Sanders for recognizing that, this isn't about a political moment. It's about the working class moment. That's what these rallies are about.
And say hello to Bernie for us, because a little fun fact, Bernie was the first person I ever interviewed.
Very cool. And I know that fun fact, and I'm going to remind him of that today when I'm standing there with him with Sean O'Brien.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Sarah, I appreciate you taking time for us.
All right. Take care.
Sarah Nelson, president of the Association of Flight Attendants.
Solidarity forever.
There you go. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to Pittsburgh here at the David Lawrence Conference Center. I'm sitting here with one of the rock stars of the conference. Chris Smalls is the president of the Amazon Labor Union, America's first independent union led by workers. Chris, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
It's been a while since we've had you back on the program. And from the last time to this time, you're now a rock star.
Yeah, it has been. It's been crazy.
I love the enthusiasm of, yeah, you're a rock star. Yeah, it's been crazy.
No, that's just me. That's just me on day to day.
But, here's the thing. Everybody I talk to here is looking to you as the answer for the labor movement. We're in a moment where people are saying, hey, organizing, people are more interested now than they've been in a long time, and everyone's looking to you as the way forward. That's got to come with some weight on it.
Absolutely. It's a lot of pressure, but at the same time, I know that I have a strong team, and, our inspiration is inspiring millions of people. And, my job is just to continue that message and show that solidarity with everybody.
No, and you're doing a great job at it. But, what you did in Staten Island, the work that you did at JFK 8 and the organizing that you did, is that something that you can replicate in Albany, for instance, and in other places? Because, I remember talking to you, and you were living in a hotel. You were there all the time. I mean, heavy labor intensive. Is that something that can be replicated time and time again?
Yeah, we're going to take some wins and losses, but we're going to take a shot. Taking a risk is the first step. And, Albany workers are ready to go. My job as the interim president is to go with the workers' decision. It's a Democratic union, and when the workers say they're ready to file their petition, I support that 100%. So whatever happens, but I know we're going to give it our all. And they have a great leader up there, Heather Goodall, and we're happy that they're ready to go. We're going to be behind them.
No, it's great to see all of this organizing, especially from young people and the bottom up, which for someone who's been in the labor movement and fighting for labor rights for better than 30 years, to see finally the kind of enthusiasm that I was hoping at every crisis point would come. I'm optimistic of the future for probably the first time in a long while. But the reality is I think our laws are so badly broken that I fear this moment gets bogged down in procedure. Any concern on that level?
No, not if I got something to do with it.
There you go.
They invited the wrong person to the White House already. Once you let me in, I get a glimpse of what the things that come in the future, and we're not going to stand for that. We're going to hold everybody accountable, and if it starts with our elected officials, I have no problem calling it out. As you've seen in the past. So.
No. You see, and I tell people, if you want to look at a master's class on how to organize and do, get grassroots, bottom-up organizing, look to what you've been able to do, because you really haven't been political. You haven't staked a flag in the ground on either side of the political fence. You're talking about, hey, how do we make people's lives better? And I think that's what has to be done across the spectrum.
Yeah. I told Lindsey Graham, this ain't a left or a right thing. It's a workers thing, and it's true. We can't tie ourselves to political parties because we have to represent all workers. And I can tell you 8,300 people in Staten Island at Amazon, we're going to have people that's going to be Trump supporters and have different political views. So we can't exclude them. We have to just keep and build off of the workplace commonality and the workplace issues.
Because at the end of the day, wages, hours, conditions, that should be universal, right? Especially conditions. I mean, because I sit and I talk to workers from Amazon, and the conditions they talk about, the injury rates, all of the heat conditions. We just talked to somebody from San Bernardino when they had the walkout on Monday, and deplorable. And finally, people saying we've had enough. I think it's important. It's an important moment.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we are pedal to the metal, trying to spread nationwide, just like Starbucks. We're joining picking lines with other industries across the nation, showing that solidarity. Me traveling across the nation on this hot labor summer tour, just trying to spread that message and keep that awareness and keep the iron hot. That's what we all have to do. We can't let this window of opportunity pass us.
Now, one of the knocks is that you organized one facility. Are you ever going to get a contract? And part of me goes, okay, I understand the argument, but the other part of me is it's building worker power. This idea that you're empowering people to demand better, I think that's just as important as getting a contract in the near future.
Yeah, and the only way we get a contract is we have to be strategic and smart as well. Of course one building's not going to do it, but we have to inspire other buildings to get involved, which we're doing right now. And it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So it's a slow grind. I know things and people want things to happen overnight and right away after the victory, but it doesn't work that way, especially with these laws in this country and the way the NLRB process is. It takes months and it could take a year or two, but we're not going to give up. And if we can force them to come to the table sooner, we're going to exhaust all those options as well.
No, this really is a David and Goliath scenario. I mean, Amazon's a multi-trillion-dollar corporation. They're enormous. You're just a guy who a couple months ago was living in a hotel, bringing food to people in the parking lot, getting arrested for it. How's the rest of the labor movement reacted to that victory, and are resources coming to help you fight those battles? Because look, Amazon's not going to run out of time or money or energy to fight you at every legal battle. I know you were at the AFT convention spending most of your time in a hotel room doing a deposition.
Yeah, definitely. We know that they're not going to give up on their end. Same thing with us. The resources are coming now. The labor movement is definitely fired up and inspired by our victory. And people are getting involved and donating to our funds. We're going to need all of that because we have to include the community in these other campaigns that will be launched as well. It didn't happen just by the people in the building. It happened with knowing that we have outside support, and we want to continue to grow that. So my job, once again, is to harness those resources for us, traveling, connected with different people, different unions, different locals, different organizations across this country that are going to get involved right away and help us with our campaigns.
No, you've been doing the miles. I see you just about everywhere. You're the hardest working man in labor. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Christian Smalls. He's the president of the Amazon Labor Union. And there's been a lot of knocks lately. I know Stephen Greenhouse wrote a piece recently that the labor movement hasn't done enough on the organizing front, haven't done enough to support groups like yours. Is that fair?
That's true. It's fair, and it's okay to hold unions accountable too. There's a lot of established unions with leadership that doesn't see eye to eye with the way, we're organizing and Starbucks is organizing because they're used to a certain style and tradition. But we're in a new school generation of organizing. This is a new face of labor. And obviously I'm not the traditional style suit and tie president that you'll see in the unions. So it's a little different, but they have to understand we're not going anywhere, and this is how it's going to be. We're in the 21st century, and we have to adapt to the times that we're in, and the corporations have no problem doing it. Labor can't be the same way. They have to make sure that the younger generation takes the torch and lead the way.
Yeah, at the end of the day, though, Chris, I mean, the reality is it's still old school organizing, still person-to-person, face-to-face, on the ground, community building, just as much as it is demanding better wages, hours, and conditions, no?
Yeah, but we have a lot more tools now. Social media is definitely huge in our campaigns, TikTok, things like that, obviously wasn't around back in the 30s and the 40s. It was face-to-face and word of mouth and several conversations. But now we have creative ways, and we have to get creative because these corporations, they're infiltrating in ways that are just unimaginable with the amount of money that they're using. We're talking about donating to public schools, starting young, infiltrating our classrooms. The only way we do that is stopping them at the gates and spreading them.
I'm glad you brought that up because we just had a conversation with Jeff Bryant the other day.
Yeah.
And he was explaining how Amazon in California has funded the schools to be a partner in job training, where all it's really turned into being is job training for Amazon. It's not teaching them the code. It's not teaching them any vocation. It's just training the next generation of cheap labor.
And also training them to become union busters. They're not only the classrooms at the bottom and kindergarten and beyond, they're talking about college courses where employee relations is a course for business. And we all know employee relations mean you're going to be a union buster.
Yeah.
So that's the creativity that these corporations are using. They're using teenagers. I just left a Fortune 500 convention, got billionaires as 16-year-olds raising startup companies that are going to be autonomous, that's going to take jobs away from people. That's the mindset they're thinking, trying to create. And we have to fight that right now with labor, and education is definitely vital. Teaching students and kids at a younger age the real history behind labor.
Yep. I
can tell you now, if I was going to be as cool as a rapper, as a union organizer, I would have did this a long time ago.
No, absolutely. And this is one of the things, being here in Pittsburgh, there was a guy who was a rapper here, Jasiri X. I don't know if he still does, but he used to do some really great labor-based rap songs. We used to use it when we were just doing commercial only program. But why is it that the music hasn't caught on to the old kind of using music as a labor vehicle to talk about working conditions, talking about pushing for a better life, that better wages, better conditions frame?
Well, the music industry is exploitive as well. That's why I left it 10 years ago. And shout out to the Hip Hop Alliance. They formed the first union in history as well. Just a few months ago, I was with them. It hasn't happened yet. Rappers, musicians, artists, creatives, influencers, they get exploited as well. The fashion industry, the same thing. I've been out there with the Model Alliance in New York City. They get exploited all the time, and it's only because their managers and the manager's manager is making more money than the creatives and the people that's putting in the work. And having a union with the hip-hop and any industry in music is also vital right now, and I think people are starting to catch hold to that as well.
Yeah, no, education being the key to this, and which is why, again, I've been for decades been saying to my union buddies, you got to get into the schools and teach labor education. You got to teach the battles of the past and the fights that it took to get the 8-hour day, to get the weekend, vacations, health care, all of the things that we take for granted and easily kind of trade away for nickels and dimes. We got to learn the history of it, most certainly.
Yeah, I mean, on career day, teachers have to stop inviting police officers and fire chiefs, bring some union leaders and union presidents.
And bring you in. I mean, because look, you clearly look like some of the high school kids today would identify. And you're right. You're not the typical labor leader, but you're effective, and that's I think is something really important.
Absolutely.
So last thing I got for you, the question going forward, what's the message for that Amazon worker out there right now who, maybe they're not being approached by an organizer, or any worker right now who's suffering under oppressive conditions or just not making ends meet? What's the message for them?
Yeah, there's unions all over this country. You just got to reach out. Don't be afraid. I know it's the first step is getting over that fear. We have to understand our value and understand our worth. And if you're upset, you're agitated, don't just sign a petition. Get involved. Reach out to these unions. Reach out to the ALU. Hit on our website, amazonlaborunion.org. Get involved. The time is now, and there's strength in numbers. So when we come together, nothing can stop us.
Good stuff. Christian, I appreciate you taking time for us. Great stuff. Keep up the amazing work you're doing, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Good stuff. Christian Small is president of the Amazon Labor Union. Love to hear your thoughts. You got any work stories you want us to know? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Thanks for tuning in to The Rick Smith Show. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @Rick Smith Show, like us on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find all that and much more at thericksmithshow.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So I got to tell you, the rock star here, really, truthfully, the rock stars of Netroots Nation, Chris Smalls, who we just talked to, the Starbucks workers, and those folks who are on the ground doing the organizing. And this is one of those things that I find interesting, that they're finding a way to bring people together and forming unions, and eventually you're going to see them grow and really become the force that I think they can be. The reason I kept hitting Chris with, do you think you're going to get a contract? Do you think this is something that can be replicated? Is because that's the knock against it. That, this is a one-off. You put in a lot of work. You did something. I've been saying for years, we have to rebuild that generational kind of viewpoint of why unions are important. And I think of, my grandparents' generation. I think of, even their kids. My aunt, who has never been in a union in her entire life, and the kind of work she did was never unionized, still a staunch supporter of unions, because understands that when workers have the ability to bargain for better wages, hours, conditions, it makes everyone's lives better, including hers. And by having a strong worker movement that demands, people have health care and retirement security and safety on the job, this, again, is something that helps everyone. And that's generational. That's something that you see, you experience, you understand. Much like I've said before, when I was a kid, the reality is, when I was a kid, union job meant better life. Union job meant, food at the end of the month for those families. Meant, kids got, better clothing, secondhand bikes, secondhand car, eventually moving out of the housing project I grew up in. So, in looking at this generationally, this could be one of those moments where we return to people who aren't going to be in unions, understanding that it's good for society for workers to have some economic power. It's good for workers to have some say and some voice in the conditions under which they labor. It's good for society to have a redistribution of wealth that encourages working families to have resources, disposable income that they can spend in the community, that they can support their families with, and oh, by the way, support small businesses with. That, to me, is the direction we need to go. If you miss any of the program, make sure you download the podcast. Wherever you get yours, you'll find ours. That's simple.
The bill I'm about to sign is not just about today. It's about tomorrow. It's about delivering progress and prosperity to American families.
Inflation Reduction Act's landmark climate action is now the law of the land, as
the worst drought in 1,200 years has water managers in 7 states, 30 tribal nations, and Mexico fighting over every precious drop.
Western states hit with unprecedented water cuts, and
science and the data leads us to now understand that we will lose 10% of our water supply by 2040.
California proposes big changes amid historic drought.
All of that history and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment. Today, courtesy of climate and energy journalist David Roberts, who tweeted recently, quote, "Every few minutes I repeat to myself in a quiet voice, it's okay. Joe Manchin can't hurt you anymore." No, he can't, David. It's okay. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, very big news. We've been talking about it for weeks, months, actually years, but
yes.
The U.S. has finally passed and signed a major climate bill.
Yes, President Biden signed the Democrats' landmark climate, healthcare, and tax reform bill into law on Tuesday, with the largest single investment in climate action in U.S. history. $370 billion in investments to speed up the transition to clean energy and tackle climate change.
Now, we should note $370 billion is a lot of money, but it is spread over 10 years, and really, we need to do a lot more.
Oh, yes, it is most definitely not enough. In remarks at the signing, Biden drew